I'm only going for like 6 days. So I want to go somewhere it wasn't terribly far to get to. Like it's only like a 5 and oh yeah, it's no, it's the place I'm going is called the Land of Eternal Spring, the city. It's always it can be warm, yeah. That's what they call Medellin. La primavera de Tanal, de Texas.
Go ahead and start this.
Yeah, put that over here so don't get me.
What's that?
Get it over here somewhere so it doesn't catch me cussing under my breath.
We got to record this to the public. All right, so we are live.
Hey, I don't ignore you.
Okay, if we can get started, it's 7 o'clock. It's time for us to start. Okay, one, two. Okay, Danny's not here either. Okay, it looks like we do have a quorum present. We have Peter's not here, and it looks like Danny's not here, but otherwise we have everybody present.
Danny couldn't make it tonight.
Okay. All right, we need to take a quick look at the agenda, which is nice and short, and get a motion for approval or any changes that need to be made. Yes, sir.
Are we going to have the pledge of allegiance and signs?
Yes, we should. Yes, thank you. That was in red, so I didn't see it. All right, let's stand for the pledge and then followed by a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you. And thank you for reminding me. I'm not used to an agenda this short. All right. Does anyone see any need to add or change the agenda? Okay, in that case, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign? Thank you. No minutes to review since there was no December joint meeting. We have one case tonight. As always, Ligon will present the case to us. We'll answer any questions that we have. The applicant will then have a chance to answer any questions we have and make any comments he would like. Following that, the floor will be open for any comments from the floor, from the public. So, in case number SU-12-22-32, Rooted Land Company, LLC, Mr. Zachary Whitman, has applied for a special use permit to operate 6 short-term rental units on 2 adjoining parcels which he owns. The 2 parcels combined contain roughly 257 acres
Yep, right there, Alan. That's good. So, Mr. Whitman bought this land, I want to say in the fall of 2019, and he, I hadn't been here for a few months at that time, and he was doing his research and his background due diligence, and at that time he had an idea that he might do a wedding venue and short-term rentals. I know we've heard this before, and I had a pretty large plan, but was taking his time to sort of get accommodated to the site and eventually move forward with some sort of a venue with short-term lodging. So that was, again, I guess, over 3 years ago. And as you can see, those 2 tax maps right there, 37-7C, 37-11 are the 2 that are subject to this request, but he also, right behind that, is 100 acres, kind of on top of the mountain there, that he also owns. So, effectively, it's a 350-plus acre site. He does have a garage apartment that he lives in, and then there's an existing short-term rental that's on the site, a single-family dwelling, 3-bedroom, that's been used for, I guess, well over 2 years as a short-term dwelling. Again, he's on the site and does do some small-scale farming activities. It's very pretty scenic site. I guess the only, going through this and talking to him in the last few years as this idea has kind of been developed, and really just, I think, as he's gotten to know the county and what maybe, people have gone before him, what's worked, what hasn't worked, his request has obviously, from the beginning, has scaled down quite a bit. As I point out in my report, he does have multiple access potential to the property, Berry Mountain. He actually has a right-of-way easement just down from the kind of principal access that I have a picture of in our packet. The short is that this property has subdivision rights that really, some folks might just say, hey, look, I'm just going to subdivide it. And again, as long as everything meets our codes, which it would, there's really not a lot that we could have to say about it. I mean, 3 acres, he can do 4 every 10 years. I look at it, he probably could easily, on a private drive, he could probably get about 10 lots out there. I mean, that's probably a minimum. But he's been very clear that, he wants something small scale, and he wants to come through the county and work out some conditions with his neighbors. And I think if you look at the conditions, I think we all were sitting in here a few months ago, and I said very clearly that I really have told applicants that if you had something more small scale on larger land, we would. I think it would be more favorable. Well, I think this is exactly the type of proposal that I was sort of envisioning, I know everybody else has that vision, that would probably be something that fits more into maybe how we see tourism developing here in Madison. Uh, and if you look at the conditions, again, I know one of the sticking points from something we had a few months ago was whether the owner could sell it and move on or increase the density. And Mr. Whitman has said very clear that, he's planning on living on that site and managing this as he has for the last couple of years. And it's not going to be transferable. If somebody wanted to transfer it, he would have to come in and have a new public hearing. And so that is a condition. If you look at the conditions, we've got, I think, 9 pretty good ones. He's giving up the ability to by right do events. Again, a year or so ago, we amended our ordinance to allow for a certain number of by right events. That's something that he's essentially he's in agreement with all of these. So that's something that would not be outside of maybe some guests that come to the site if they want to have a small event for people who are on site. That would be a possibility, but having large scale events is not something that he's looking to do. We have gone over things like lighting, emergency. I won't read them all to you. Obviously, you can read them. I know the Plan Commission has talked about this before. The one thing is that we have talked about is the access. I've been talking to VDOT, and the traffic counts have pointed out once you get to this segment of Graves Mill, does go down 300 during the week. It's probably more during the weekend, but the site distance for the existing entrance is not ideal. What VDOT would like to see. Again, he does have other places to access the site, but I think, I won't put words in his mouth, but I think he believes that bringing any more traffic off Berry Mountain Lane or even to that easement would not really be maybe the most neighborly thing to do. So he is planning on just principally, I think it's a good idea using that entrance on Graves Mill Road, using that principal entrance. With that, I talked to VDOT, and they said, it doesn't make the site distance. Ideally, doesn't have the site distance, but a reduce in speed. It's not posted, so it's kind of by default 55 miles per hour there. But if it was reduced, that would obviously be more advantageous. And talking to Mr. Wilson, our assistant resident engineer at VDOT, he says 30 to 60 days we could do a study, and they have the ability to lower that speed limit, and that would be, by their recommendation, the easiest thing to do. I mean, looking at traffic, and I've been out there numerous times. I did pull. Brian Gordon gave me the accident data for the last, I think it was 56 months. Most of it's people in deers. There have been a couple other non-animal accidents toward the intersection, but it's a curvy road. The data doesn't say it's dangerous. I think most people, when you're on a curvy road, you tend to drive a little slower than maybe the speed limit. So maybe not the most ideal situation, but I don't see this as something very, that it's overtly dangerous. It's been used as a short-term rental. He uses that access. Again, I'm comfortable with it, and VDOT is more than happy to, under our request, initiate that speed study this anytime this winter or spring. And again, just to kind of put it out there, I mean, he's not really these stick-built houses. The two that would be introduced wouldn't come online probably for a couple of years at minimum anyway. So we do have some time before it would, maybe if this is approved, reaches max density to begin with. So again, I think we have a good set of conditions. Just process wise, if it were approved, what I do is I actually write the applicant. I send a letter, put out, here are the conditions for your SUP. I know in the past we have recorded them publicly. We can do that here, but they're sent to the applicant. They're on file at our office. They're on our server. Whether I'm here or years from now, anybody can get their hands on these conditions, and it becomes part of the zoning of the land. So it's something that's enforceable. We try to make them clear yet direct. So I think we have a good set of conditions. And again, just kind of in closing, I think during our last comprehensive plan, of course, I wasn't here, and we're talking about this now as we look forward to the new comprehensive plan. Is what type of tourism activities do we want? And I've always, as I said, I think small niche tourism, lodging is something that is strong here in Madison. Whether or not it gets to a point where it's saturated or not, I guess the market will eventually decide. But I feel like the problems, at least me personally, that I sort of reservations with the last glamping proposal, I think I feel the exact opposite about this. And that's why I recommended approval, as I feel like this is something that is more in line with what the vision that's kind of been set out here in Madison. So, any questions for me?
Yes.
I don't have a question for Ligon, but I have a question for Sean. And I want to say first, I'm not opposed to this, but I got a concern. I went and talked to Brian Daniels today, and this property is in land use. So if this property is in land use and we put 4 units in C1, the way I read the ordinance, it says that each use in C1 requires 10 acres for every use. So if you've got 4 buildings in there, in my mind, that's 40 acres. And in A1, you've got to have at least an acre for each building that you have in A1. I guess my question is, Sean, how much of this will have to be pulled out of land use and rollback taxes paid on it and be in regular taxes?
The general answer is a portion of it would have to. You'd be taken out of land use with the rollback taxes charged. Now, with regard to the larger question, I think that the state has some guidelines that Brian would follow. I have not spoken to Brian Daniel about this, but that's a good point.
When I spoke to Brian today and just talking to him, and I know he didn't do any research while I was there, but he was under the same opinion that each use was 10 acres. And again, I'm not opposed to it. I'd just like to know the answer to that.
Sitting here, I do not know the
Okay.
answer. I can have the answer by Monday.
Yeah, I think it's just something that the commissioner, when someone comes in the building permit, we send it to, Brian gets a copy of it, and then he'll determine, usually with a home site, they take out an acre. And that would be a rollback on the acre and whatever the value of the improvement is. So, if
In C1, it says each use is 10 acres.
I think the
Each house
minimum,
would be a use,
yeah, okay. Well, he
in
can,
my opinion.
right. And I just have to take that to Brian. That's just something that once we send the building permit down to him and he values it, then he does his, whatever it is he needs to do.
Okay. Any other question for Ligon? All right. If not, Mr. Whitman, would you like to address the Planning Commission and maybe answer some questions?
For the sake of time, I think I do know most of the folks in the audience here, so I won't do any introductory remarks. I think we'll just go straight to questions if that's
Okay.
sufficient for the group today.
Does anyone have a question for Mr. Whitman? Yes, Mike.
As far as your emergency access for 37-7C, you're going to put in a different separate bridge for that too as well.
Correct.
I guess you have to go across it, right?
Correct.
Any particular reason why you want to do an emergency access for that? You got one parcel that way, right? One house?
Well, the 37-7C will have 2 parcels if approved. And then that will be, again, the bridge is going to be the primary entrance for the property. So The-
Secondary, so this has got two entrances,
which parcel specifically?
37-7C.
Correct.
So that'll have two entrances.
It has two entrances now. The primary entrance is served by an older bridge. That's what I'm replacing. So we're going to abandon the older bridge that is at the primary entrance and then put in the 100,000 pound VDOT-C, whatever the rating is. So all
So
traffic can
it'll be
cross.
an addition.
Correct.
Okay.
But just to be clear, we're going to abandon the old bridge. If that makes sense.
So you won't have two entrances.
There's another deeded easement down the road with the low water crossing, but that would be emergency use only. We wouldn't use that for primary.
Okay. And yes, Peter, Pete.
Yeah, I guess another question I got, if that's a tributary stream and you're gonna put a bridge across that stream, in order to enter that stream, we have to have something from DDQ to do that?
He's got everything he needs for the bridge.
Yeah,
We're reviewing the
it's-
plans
it's
now.
fast.
Yeah,
It's
he
everybody.
does.
Yes.
He does. Yep.
It's VMRC, it's Army Corps, it's DEQ.
Just-
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. No one has. And of course, we have had 2 workshop meetings where Mr. Whitman has been before us also. So he's answered a lot of our questions already.
Apologies for seeing me so often.
That's okay. That's what we're here for. All right. Any other questions from the Planning Commission? Thank you. All right. That opens the floor to the public comment. It looks like we do have quite a few people tonight, so if possible, I'd like for you to limit your comment to perhaps 3 or 4 minutes at most. And who would like to make a public comment? Yes, thank you. Please identify yourself and
My name is Judy Elias, and my husband Ken and I own the piece of property across the Rapidan River from tax map 377C. In the proposal with the items 1 through 9 of the suggested special use permit restrictions, number 9 calls for emergency service entrances through existing rights of way to both of these pieces of property. 377C would utilize a 10-foot right-of-way that is already improved and passable by emergency service vehicles. I'm not at all aware that the Berry Mountain Lane right-of-way is at all improved, that there's any evidence of the entrance and exit to that right-of-way for emergency service vehicles. And I would suggest that you include wording that to the effect that no short-term rental of any structure on 3711 be allowed until that right-of-way is improved enough for emergency service vehicles to access it. The other concern I have is a more general concern for the Board of Supervisors, and that is this particular issue establishes a precedent for indicating an alternate access to a piece of property than the street address access. Those are both in number 9. These are alternate accesses to these pieces of property. Do you have a policy and procedure extant now for a way to notify emergency personnel of exactly where those entrances are and what they're supposed to use? I don't think you do. So you better consider that. If you're going to send a fire truck out to a grass fire or a structure fire, where are they going to enter these rights of way? And do they know that? And that's all. Thank you.
thank you. Any other public comment? And again, if you would identify yourself.
My name is, the better? My name is Mitch Bernstein. I live in Graves Mill. One of the neighbors of Mr. Whitman. And I just want to say to the commission that I think Mr. Whitman deserves a lot of credit for the way he's gone about this process. He's been very sensitive to the neighbors' needs in this process, and there are many, and I'll touch on them very briefly. But as Ligon pointed out, he could have done this by right. He could have subdivided, achieved what he wanted to do, and none of us in the neighborhood would have been any the wiser until it was a done deed. Instead, he's come and applied for special use permit, which, number one, provides transparency to all of us, an opportunity for all of us to give him both personally, off the record, private, not in a meeting context, and in a public meeting, the opportunity to express our concerns and be assuaged, which he has done, and to submit himself to oversight and restrictions voluntarily. I mean, this is the way he's proceeded. And I just think that you don't see that these days from the quote unquote developers. And we had a lot of concerns. When I say we, myself, my wife, and many of the neighbors that we've spoken with, there were issues about lights. There's going to be lights. Issues about noise. There's going to be noise. Are there going to be events held on the property? Expansion. Is it going to grow? Transferability. Is he just going to develop it and sell it to some outsider? And all of those have been addressed, as far as I can tell, in the conditions that were proffered, some of which were proffered directly by Mr. Whitman to Mr. Ligon for your consideration, and which at the workshop I asked you all to please incorporate, and you have. And I'm very grateful for that. So the other thing to point out that nobody's really talked about, this is a very unobtrusive development. I mean, Zachary, has invited the neighbors, given us tours. You need to drive way up into the woods to even find these sites that are going to be developed. So it's not going to change the character. You're not going to see it from the road. It's not going to change the character of the land. It's going to be limited in perpetuity as long as Zachary's alive and owns the property. I hope it's a long time. To these units that are going to be developed under the SUP. And I don't think as neighbors we could have asked for much more than that. He's addressed every single one, not forgetting that he could have done this all by right. And none of these conditions would have been imposed. So I just put that for your consideration and say thank you to Zachary for being so considerate of your neighbors.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Carmela Patrick. I also live in Graves Mill. I will say, as Mr. Whitman has been open and transparent to the neighbors, but I still have a concern about and I believe you all received a copy of my comments, the maximum number of guests on the property, the type of events, the noise, light pollution, and sight distance. I feel that these concerns could be addressed by tightening up the conditions. For example, there is no time for quiet hours. There's no height limit for any new lights that are going to be put on the property. That condition relating to commercial events, I feel is kind of broad. And the report stated that 24 people could be there maximum, but if you read the information that was provided to us neighbors, really 29 people could be there. So I think that's kind of a large gathering, not really a small gathering. So I just feel that although I'm not opposed to what he's trying to do, I understand it's a commercial venture. I feel that the conditions could be tightened up to lessen the impact to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'm Jacob Gilly. Grew up in the Grays Mill area through high school, went to college, came back, and my wife and I currently farm in the Rochelle area. And this is the first meeting I've been to of this type, and excited to be here and learn about the process. But also, I'm a young farmer, and my wife and I are looking to possibly try to expand our operation and looking into alternative revenue streams. As many of you know, agriculture is pretty tough. Cattle prices are tough, very volatile. So these types of revenue streams are important, I think, for new and beginning producers coming back to the county. And if we want to continue to have a vibrant agricultural community, I think being able to pair these types of small to medium enterprises with traditional production enterprises is vital. And I came out tonight mostly to provide my support, because I'm afraid that if this proposal, which seems extremely reasonable in comparison to the last one that was put forth, is shut down, producers like myself will just kind of become discouraged with the potential to try to purchase land into the county and continue to keep it in production agriculture. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
If I may, I'm still Mitch Bernstein. I
Thanks.
still live in Graves Mill. I just want to address one issue that was touched on, and that's the safety issue of the entrance. And I know there's nothing that can be done about it, but if people have not gone out there, there are two hills, there were two rises, and the entrance to the property is at the bottom of both of those rises. And there is a very short, and it's written up in the packet. And I do think that having posted limits is a matter of safety, not just for the new guests who aren't familiar with it, but to residents, because it's posted at 55, and that's not always just 55. And you come down one of those hills, if somebody's going, oh, is this where we're supposed to turn? And it's a sharp turn. I won't be as sharp as my understanding as it is now, but they're slowing down and they're going slowly, and you're coming over a rise and you don't see them. It's dangerous for us as residents, not just as the guests. And if there's people behind us, then that's really a safety concern. So I don't suggest you change where you're going to have the bridge. It makes sense. It's where it is. But if you could or would, and I don't know if I addressed it to the Planning Commission or to the Board of Supervisors, whoever is the correct authority, but to please work with VDOT to establish these slower zones approaching the entrance. I think it would behoove the process, improve the safety of the neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
I'm Sherman Patrick. Excuse me, Sherman Patrick. I'm new to the Graves Mill area. I've met many of my neighbors through trash pickup and holiday parties and things that we've had just in the 6 months that we've owned along that corridor. And we love Graves Mill. My wife and I searched for Graves Mill for probably 15 years before we found the location that really appealed to us. We're not unfamiliar with this area at all. We spent a lot of time in the park and spent a lot of time in the area with our children, raising them, camping, and visiting facilities like is being proposed by Mr. Whitman. So we truly see the value in them. We're also very sympathetic to the agricultural situation and needing to have a little bit of extra to bridge the gaps in some years. But my concern with this case is the precedent-setting nature of the proposal. Now that we have found our little piece of heaven in the Graves Mill corridor, we don't want to see it become a tourist mobile home park or campground, or see that the character of the area begins to change into something that is very different than it is today, that it might become a predominantly area that is predominantly used for short-term rentals. The short-term rentals are a very profitable exercise in commercial entrepreneurism. I respect that. But because it is so profitable, I think that this will be a precedent for others. The success of it will lead to others doing the same thing. That will mean more traffic on Graves Mill Road. It will mean that if we're not very, very specific about what the parameters of the use are, that things can get out of hand very quickly. And I've seen this happen in many other communities, which is why I am now here in your community. So I think the conditions that are written are not specific enough. I think the ideas and goals and proposals that Mr. Whitman has made are perfect, but I'd like to see them in writing. I would like to see them as commitments and conditions that will actually regulate the use in the manner that he has described. And then I will be referring people to him for the next 20 years, I hope, to stay at his facility. But in the meantime, I think that we have to make sure that we have the operating guidelines very clearly in writing so that it doesn't get out of hand or other people don't come in and use his special use permit as the precedent that should get them the same sort of liberal conditions, and then they get out of hand. So I do urge you to be more specific. I'm particularly concerned about the driveway location and the site distance issue. That's a safety issue. And I think that what we're doing right now in the conditions is we're leaving it to VDOT to solve it. I think that if VDOT does not reduce the speed limit, which seems like it is a possible outcome, that there should be something else done in this application to make that entrance safer. Because the site distance issue means that if you're going 55 miles per hour and a car is stopped in the road, you do not have enough time to react to avoid hitting that vehicle. That's why these standards are what they are. You drop it down to 45, you still, according to VDOT standards, don't have enough time to stop to avoid a collision. So that's why we're talking about 35 miles per hour. 35 miles per hour might be fine there, but if VDOT does not reduce the speed limit to 35, what are we going to do? We're just going to live with an unsafe condition that has been exacerbated by the increase of number of turning movements in this location. And also turning movements by people who are unfamiliar with the area because it is a short-term lodging facility. The other conditions that I think should be more specific have to do with the light, the sound, and I've already mentioned traffic. So we just need to be, and when I say traffic in this regard, I'm talking about the number of people who will be on the property for a day event, for example. If you were to have a family reunion and people, all of the units are rented to the family, does that mean that other family members might be coming to the property? There could be quite a bit more traffic if they come for the picnic, but don't stay for the night. So I just urge you to be much more specific about the conditions and make sure that we're not setting a precedent that's going to change the character of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name's Larry Thomas. Every time I come to one of these meetings, I say, I'm not going to say anything. And every time I come to one of these meetings, I say something. I've been here for 43 years. I would come here via DC, Anchorage, Manassas, and finally here. Over 43 years, I've seen the character of Madison change radically. And I'm not really particularly disturbed by most of it, but I am kind of disturbed by the overregulation of Madison County and the oversight, not supervision, but oversight of the Right to Farm Act, which includes agritourism. It protects farming and agriculture to be able to have guests come and experience agriculture, nature, etc. I would just like to provide some contrast in terms of the concerns over the number of people who come. I'd like to ask anyone, churchgoer here, how many people go to your church on Sunday? Is it over 25? Maybe not at Grace Chapel, but I'm sure Mount Carmel has more than 25 people in it on any given Sunday or for a special event. So I question why we would want to limit Mr. Whitman's ability to have more than 25 or 29 people, and is somebody going to go in there and count? With reference to music, sound, noise, when the Pentecostal church decides to have revival in August
right down there by John Mack's house, if anybody knows where John Mack used to live. It's right across from property owned by Mr. Lovelace, who I see wrote a comment to you. Are we going to ask the Pentecostal church to tone it down? Because for every week in August that they have revival, I sit up on my property up Garth Run and enjoy the music. It's part of our culture. And hopefully that is part of our culture that won't change. I remember when I came here, only I came here from like Alaska. So this was like a lot more civilized than where I was coming from. And the temptation to come here for a short and be here for a short term. And everybody says, you know, you're never going to be a Madisonian if you came from someplace else. That's not true. I've been treated like one of us, you know. And I'm not sure why, because I'm probably more outspoken than the people who treated me that way. But when you come here, I would urge you to look around and try and appreciate what we already have. And part of what we have is the freedom to have a field party. Anybody ever been to a field party? Lots of really obnoxious things happen at field parties. And I won't go down the list. But if you have a field and you have friends, you have a right to invite them to your field party. And Mr. Whitman, I've never met you personally, but I do have 2 Airbnb rentals in an agricultural zone where people really appreciate being able to look at a cow, or they ask me if that was a hen or a rooster or whatever. And I enjoy meeting those people. They come, they leave, they don't mind spending money, you know, a lot more than I've got. I check out the local Airbnb rentals. Some of them are too cool. I came across Mr. Whitman's Airbnb rental, and Mr. Whitman has acted against the advice of some of the realtors that I've spoken, in that he has put an incredibly more valuable facility in a neighborhood where there aren't so many valuable facilities. There are a few, because some come-years put them there. You know, there's one at the end of Graves, up next to the park that I would like. Never mind. The point is, Mr. Whitman has a very nice place. And if people are paying the prices that he's charging to come there, you want more like Mr. Whitman, because you're getting taxes for that. And the location of his property, if you drive down Graves Mill Road, you're never going to see it. You'd have to go on his property to see it and then wander around. I know hunters who've gotten lost there. And the only way we knew they were there was because they said, there's a tennis court here. Where am I? You know, it was, oh yeah, now we know how to find you. This was years ago, okay, before you bought the property. One other suggestion, if I've made any suggestions. One suggestion I'd like to make with regard to signage. Slowing down is not the only option. When you're going down, what's the road? From Airport Road the other way, down towards Charlottesville, and you get to Polo Ground Road, there's a sign that shows a drawing, the configuration of the roads, and it's like a caution sign that says, look here, there's an outlet here. Slow down, you know. And you could do that before Mr. Whitman's property. You could say there's an entrance 50 feet ahead, you know, beware. And that's common. It happens all over the place. I don't know why we can't do it here. Mr. Whitman could even put a sign that says, my entrance is right over the hill, you know, slow down. So that's all I got to say. I'm not worried about the lights. I live close enough to Mr. Whitman's property that I could probably hear his music. And my neighbors wouldn't mind his music or his noise. I'm sure he's not going to have a field party where it's littered with beer cans the next morning and clothing and all kinds of other things, you know, that we don't regulate. I think Mr. Whitman is a decent fellow just by looking at his property. It's a very nice piece of property. I congratulate you and welcome you to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other? Yes.
Is this on? Can you hear me? My name is Elizabeth Maloney. I live down the road and up in the mountains down from Mr. Whitman. And I want to concur with the concerns about the safety of the entrance. Because when you leave the Wolftown Mercantile and you head on the Graves Mill Road, you go past a lot of houses and you cross the river, and then you're finally open. And people just seem to build up a head of steam and start going because it's open, they can see until you get close to Mr. Whitman's. And I love the idea the lady had about a sign showing the entrance coming up and the curve in the road. I don't think a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit is going to affect, all of us who build up a head of steam when we have wide open spaces and just before you get to them. But that's my greatest concern, is that somebody's going to come around and some person's going to slowly, safely, they think, make their way out onto Graves Mill, and they're going to run into each other there. So, or somebody's going to run into the back of somebody, and I don't know how you mandate that kind of safety or just the signs. But I would ask you to please be very careful about it. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. If not, does anyone on the planning commission have a comment? Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I've got a question for Lee.
Mhm.
So, in reference to Ms. Elias's question or comments, is he required to have the emergency access?
I mean, if there was an emergency, they're going to use the main entrance, but there is a river there, and we were just sort of thinking that they does have a couple different right of ways to the property. That if there was a flood or just something very rare, I mean, to flood that bridge out, we're all going to be in trouble with that bridge. So, just that there are other options to get on the property if need be. I mean, the chances of that bridge not being functional or being flooded are minuscule to none. And that's how they would access it.
But as I suspect, there's no requirement that says he has to.
No. We just want to just be clear that, yeah, you could, there are other options to get on the property. And it would need to be improved. I mean, it sounds like one of them would. And I've been back there, but, there'd be some improvements to that, so.
So basically, that was another voluntary offering to provide for safety.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Any other question or comment?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that case number SU-12-22-32 be recommended to the Board of Supervisors for approval with the condition that Ligon keeps talking with VDOT till we get the speed limit resolved.
I second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so case number SU-12-22-32 will be recommended for approval with the condition that Ligon continue to work with VDOT to get that speed limit more appropriate.
And maybe some signage too. I'm sure that's.
Actually, that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
In
sir.
terms of the speed limit,
Mhm.
if the planning commission has a speed limit in mind, it might be appropriate to have that as part of your recommendation. If not,
Yeah.
then, just, I don't want to hijack your motion or your
Well,
recommendation.
Well, Ligon, you might be able to answer this. Doesn't
yeah, I mean,
VDOT have
if-
standards that they.
Right. I mean,
just-
they'll do the speed study.
Yeah.
And, basically they look and see what do a 48-hour study, and they see how many are outside the 55. And I put it in the packet if you wanted to read it. But again, their attitude's been it's a fairly straightforward. If we can get it done, turn it around pretty quickly. So that's probably all we really need, is just to say that with the conditions that are in the packet, we'll also continue to work with them. So I think we're okay to, if board, keep that in mind.
Does
Board.
that sound reasonable? Yeah, okay.
I just give you opinions.
Thank you. And we rely on them, believe me. All right. So is there any other item from the Planning Commission or any other item from the public?
Yes. I'm not sure you voted.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, you did vote.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Apologize.
All right. If not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Have you ever had anybody opposed?
No.
I'm gonna do it one time, just to try it
Just
out.
for the fun of it.
All right. Normally we wait for planning commission to leave, but they look like they're going to stay with us. So let's start. We do have a quorum. We do need to adopt an agenda. Anything we need to add to the agenda this evening? What's the pleasure of the board?
And Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. As always, we start with just generalized public comment. If anybody has any general public comment? All right, let's go right to the case. Case number SU-12-22-32, Rooted Land Company, LLC, Mr. Zachary Whitman, has applied for a special use permit to operate 6 short-term rental units on 2 adjoining parcels which he owns. The 2 parcels combined contain roughly 257 acres and are identified on Madison County tax maps as 37-7C and 37-11. The 100-acre parcel 37-7C is zoned A1 agricultural, and in this zoning district, more than one short-term rental on a single parcel requires a special use permit. Currently, this parcel contains 1 by right 3-bedroom short-term rental unit and an additional 3-bedroom short-term, a 3-bedroom short-term rental unit is proposed. The adjoining 157-acre parcel 37-11 is split zone C1 conservation and A1 agriculture, and a special use permit is required for more than one short-term rental unit on a single parcel. Currently, this parcel is undeveloped, but 4 short-term rental units are proposed. The proposed 4 short-term rental units would be a 3-bedroom unit, a 3 1-bedroom units, and the subject parcels are located on Grays Mill Road, Route 662. The existing dwelling located on parcel 37-7C contains a postal address of 2410 Grays Mill Road, Madison, Virginia. Ligon, anything to add?
No, if you are inclined to approve it, I would just make the motion to accept those conditions that are in the packet, and I'll work with VDOT to initiate this speed study and maybe some signage there. And again, Mr. Wilson from VDOT seemed to think that would be pretty straightforward, and getting a sign up wouldn't be hard.
And just to answer Mr. McPatrick's question, the conditions that you have that are stated, the 9, they go along with the special use permit. They are all in ink and signed off by the county and the applicant.
Yeah, well, remember, we can impose the conditions.
Yeah.
So that's why I recommend what has been written in the packet. You just, in a motion, just
Absolutely.
say,
But
and then
these are conditions that will go along with this permit.
Absolutely.
Not
And-
vague or anything of that
right.
nature.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to other conditions, and
Yes,
we've
sir.
had conditions go before circuit court judge, and that particular judge seemed to think they read pretty well. So we don't want to go there, but I'm just saying,
stay away from
I think it's written pretty plain and clear.
Yeah. Questions for Ligon?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple of questions for clarification addressed to Mr. Ligon and possibly Mr. Whitman, and they relate to Berry Hill Lane. I drove out there Saturday, and I wanted to know when the state maintenance ends, the state maintained road ends. Does Berry Lane Road is that the rest of that a private road or?
That's right. I'll let him, he knows more about it, but becomes a private, he has a private easement through his deeds that allow him to access through that, where in state, it is private. That's correct. Is that right?
But the right of way, this emergency right of way, the current access is contained in a right of way that exists that actually connects to the public part of Berry Hill Lane, correct? I can hear you well enough.
Yeah, use the microphone there because we've got, it's recorded. Thank you.
So where you're talking about where the sign says end of state maintenance.
Yes, sir.
The road actually takes a right and that goes through Mr. Miller's property.
Yes.
And then into the back 157. That is, and I wish I had my lawyer here with me. It's deemed an old state highway. So technically, if you go back 2 deeds, the state highway ends in my property. The other access point runs through Mrs. Shiflett's property. That's one of the ones I volunteer would be an emergency once I do improve. It is not improved, but I've also made a promise to her that that will not be used, at all for daily use for gas. It would simply be for emergency purposes, and I won't go back on my word on that. So the one I believe you really want to know about is the one that goes to Mr. Miller's, and that is the 690. Does anyone have the map up? Whatever the number is, it actually ends in my property.
But that's not where you're proposing the emergency exit. You're using the right of way that
It's
actually.
one of the. I mean, we have 4 totals.
Okay. The other right of way that you have that goes through, I believe, the 4695C, that's Mary Shiflett's property.
Correct.
Does that also cross 3711C, Mr. Clark's property as well?
It does for about 12 feet.
Okay, so everybody, they're aware that that you're going to be using right away.
Writing up legal contracts for
Okay.
everyone right now in that process.
Okay.
More dependent on how tonight would go.
Well, last couple comments I have, Mr. Chairman, then I'm done. One thing that I really appreciate about your proposal is that unlike many other proposals that come here, there are no promises of vague and unrealistic benefits to the county that are put into these to try to sway us to approve them. This is a very honest, straightforward, well thought out, well developed plan. It's reasonable. You're considerate of your neighbors. And I commend you on that and also commend Mr. Webb for his work on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Jewett. Since we've gotten to Mr. Whitman, other questions for Mr. Whitman? Mr. Whitman, any more comments?
None. Go ahead.
To the public. To the public. Any comments from the public? All right, back to the board. We do have a motion or a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and that would include the 9 proffers and the commitment from Mr. Webb to continue to work through VDOT.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I got a couple of things here. In response to the conditions being not being specific enough, I think they are specific in my opinion. And as far as to address Mr. Patrick's comments about setting the precedent, I think those of us who have been around in November, where everything was a no, you will see that that is not the case. Each application certainly stands on its own as presented, and the ones we turned down in November were not in keeping with what Madison's vision was. And this one, in my opinion, very much is. Also, as far as Graves Mill being Thomas. I thank you for your insight. We're also working on the comp plan, you guys, so keep up with that. Now, as far, I am in favor of this. I am not in favor of the last condition that the planning commission gave us, that this would be, how they put it, they would recommend approval based upon your continuing to deal with VDOT. Well, the Board of Supervisors, we will, I think we have in the past, and we will in this case, I believe, we will contact VDOT, get a speed study done. We did it on Lester Oots Lane, right? In fact, huh? And and it only took, I don't know, maybe 2 months, because I had the constituent that asked us to look into it, call me back and go, damn, that was quick. It's like, okay, there you go. So anyhow, based on that, like Ligon said earlier, with the timing of the units that Mr. Whitman's going to put in, by the time he gets all those units put in, we will, I feel sure we will have a VDOT speed study and a speed limit posted. So that's all I got.
All right. Other comments? I do. I've got to agree. Mr. Whitman coming out with these conditions and going through this process in such a transparent way where all of this can be done by right based on subdivision ordinances and laws in Madison County. I think it's kind of amazing some of the things that he has agreed to in this. I hope somebody has told you not to, but it just kind of speaks to, it speaks to what kind of neighbor you've got. And that wish more people would be like that. And we see these cases very, very often. In November, we ended up denying 2 different ones. This is certainly, if this is the precedent that short-term rentals set, then that's a good tone for Madison County. Hope you do well, and we'll see how this motion goes.
Oh, I do have one more thing. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Probably, I don't know, what's a good estimate of the number of roads in Madison County that mirror Graves Mill Road? Huh? 70% of our roads in Madison County are like Graves Mill. I mean, I live in Etland, and certainly mine does. I mean, I drove the school bus up Graves Mill Road back in the day for a couple of years.
You were like 16.
I was 16.
Yeah.
That's when we could. I've been driving cattle trucks. I didn't see what difference that was.
Same thing.
But so anyhow, I just wanted to point that out to Ms. Maloney. That that is the situation in Madison County.
What would you like to do?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve case number SU-12-22-32 with accepting the 9 conditions that are in the packet.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Information and correspondence. Do we have anything this evening, Ms. Weekly? There you go. Let's do public comment again. Public comment. Public comment. All right. Yeah, we appreciate you putting back the microphone. Anything online? Not just us. All right. Public comment's over. Anything else this evening? What do y'all want to do?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Thank you all.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Yeah, man. Huh? 90.
I know.